So I have a question here that was posted to my video called How the World Was Created. And in order to really benefit from this question, you would have to have watched that video because this is about going a little bit further and going a little bit more in detail about some of the things I talk about in the video. So I recommend you watch the other video before you watch this one. So there are several questions here, so I'll just take one of them at a time and comment on one at a time. A few questions, if you could possibly provide your wisdom. How come source consciousness divided itself in the first place to create the first sphere? What is the point of creating sphere? Okay, let's go back. How come source consciousness divided itself in the first place to create the first sphere? What I explained in the video is that our world of form started with one being, which I call the Creator. And it first created a void in what is called the Allness. And in that void, it created a sphere, and it filled it with energy that could take on form. And then it created self-aware extensions of itself, sent them into that first sphere, and they became co-creators who then co-created the sphere. And when the first sphere had reached a certain level, it became a permanent sphere, and then a second sphere was created. So the question is, why did the Creator divide itself and create the first sphere? Well, it did so because the nature of a creator is to create a world of form. That's simply what a creator does. So it does it partly because it can grow by its own awareness. It expands its own awareness, but also it creates self-aware extensions of itself that start out with a very localized sense of self, and by interacting with the environment they are in, they expand that sense of self. And ultimately, the goal of a creator creating these spheres is to educate other creators, to raise self-aware beings up to the same level of the Creator. So the next question, what is the point of creating sphere 1, 2, and 3 all the way to the 7th where we are? So as I said, there was one sphere. When it had been raised up to the permanent level, there was a second one, a third one, and so on, and we are now in the 7th sphere in our world of form. And the point is that each sphere becomes a little denser. The energies are a little denser, which means it becomes more of a challenge to start out with a localized sense of self and expand your sense of self, expand your connection to the one mind until you realize that you are out of the one mind, everything else is out of the one mind. That's ultimately how you grow, is you come to that realization that you are one with the whole. You start out as an individual being, and you gradually expand your sense of self until you realize you are one with the whole. You can call it the Buddha consciousness, the Christ consciousness, the Krishna consciousness, whatever you want to call it. These are just words we have here on earth. But that's the process. So the process is that you create these denser and denser spheres whereby it becomes more challenging. And this is what can lead to the situation that I explained in the video, where some people couldn't connect to oneness, and therefore they fell into the next sphere, and that's why we can have a situation like we have on planet Earth, or we have all of this conflict. But it's still an opportunity to overcome the illusion of separation and reconnect to oneness, become one with the one mind. And it's by dealing with all of these issues that we grow towards oneness. So in a sense, you could say, the denser the spheres become, we gain different experiences than you could have in the first spheres. And this will go on. I don't know exactly how long it will go on, because I'm living in this sphere and I'm mostly focused on descending from this sphere. But I imagine it will go on until the Creator determines that it has reached its goal, whatever that goal would be. Where did Source even originate from? And so with Source, it's what I call the creator. So our world of form started, there was one creative being, the creator, who decided to create our world of form. Now, beyond our world of form is something that the Ascended Masters have called the Allness. And there's not a lot of descriptions that the Masters are given about the Allness because it's very difficult to use words to describe it. But one thing we can say is that in the Allness, there are beings. But all beings are aware that they are part of God. They are out of God's presence. They are out of God's being. They know this. They experience themselves as individual extensions of the one mind, Source, God, whatever you want to call it. And so there aren't really any separate forms in the Allness. And that's why our Creator had to create a void in the Allness where you can create a form that seems to be separate. And it's by interacting with these seemingly separate forms that we can start with a localized sense of self and grow to that awareness that everything actually came out of the One. So our Creator came out of the oneness. It was a being in the oneness. But ultimately, our Creator came from another creation where it also started out with a point-like sense of self, gradually grew to the Creator consciousness, then re-entered the Allness, and after some time decided to create its own sphere. And then, why does Source want to create anything at all? Well, because this is how you grow when you reach that level. In other words, we are looking at life and creation from inside a specific world of form that was created by one Creator. So our task here is to grow, expand our sense of self and grow towards the Creator consciousness. That's our goal here. And once we reach the Creator consciousness, we will go into the Allness, at least for some time, although time really doesn't apply there, but we'll reconnect or enter the Allness, and then we may decide at some point we want to raise our consciousness further, and the way to do that is to create our own world of form. So that's why the Creator originally created our world of form. But of course, when you are seeing yourself as an extension of God's being, you also want to give the opportunity for others to reach that level of consciousness. In other words, you want to create a world of form that can give other people the opportunity of growing towards that Creator consciousness. So in other words, you are serving the whole. Is Source not just content to be Source, as in, what is the point of all of this if we just need to elevate ourselves back up to join Source, only then to co-create a new planet where the inhabitants of this new planet will have to do the same thing to just re-elevate and get closer to Source? It's this kind of like a game for Source. And you can of course describe it as a game, but I would consider it more the process. And this is where we have to be careful, because this is where the linear mind breaks down for us when we start considering these deeper existential questions. Because I find in my mind, my linear mind wants to say, well, yeah, okay, I can understand that we live in a world of form, and that this world of form had a beginning. It had an origin point, and it did. There was a point where our world of form didn't exist. Our Creator then decided to withdraw itself, create a boundary around itself in the Allness, withdraw itself into a singularity, and then expand to that first sphere, and then create extensions of itself there. So everything in our world of form has a beginning. And it will have an ultimate end when it has fulfilled its purpose and it reunites with the allness. But see, we are not going to disappear when we reunite with the allness. It doesn't mean we disappear as individual beings. We still exist as individual beings. So there is an outcome of creating a creation. There are now beings, we are now existing as beings in the allness, and we weren't there before. So when I contemplate this whole process, my linear mind wants to say, yeah, but what then created the allness? What was before? There must have been a point where there was no allness. But see, that's not the case. We are in a world that has a beginning and an end. But we cannot project that onto the allness. The allness was always there. It didn't have a beginning and the ending. But there is a process in the allness where there are these beings in the allness, and they see that there's a value to having a contrasting experience to the allness, namely a level that starts and ends. So you have two elements of creation. There is the eternal that never started, never ended. And then there's the level of the world of worlds of form that have a beginning and an ending. And it's the interplay between these two that causes even the allness to evolve and grow. It's just that the allness didn't have a beginning. It doesn't have an ending. And this is what our minds can. I mean, I even feel in my own mind when I think about it, it's like it almost short circuits, you know. The brain can't quite deal with this. But, you know, it's this question again, like scientists are asking, why is there something rather than nothing? And it's, in a sense, a meaningless question, because the reason we can ask the question is that there is something, and we are part of that something. And there has always been something. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here to ask the question. It's meaningless to say that there was a point where there was nothing. That's, as I said, it's just because we are looking at it from inside a creation that had a beginning and will have an ending. But there have been many other worlds of form that had a beginning and an ending before ours. There will be many later. There are many now that are evolving at the same time as ours. But beyond that level of worlds of form that evolve, have a beginning and ending, there's the allness which had no beginning and no ending. And it's, you know, the linear mind cannot really fathom this. You can experience it. You can experience the reality of it. But in order to do that, you have to, as I've explained in many of my videos, you really have to, the conscious you has to step outside the outer mind, because the linear mind will always think in terms of beginning and ending. There must be a why. There must be a start. There must be a reason why it started. There is no reason. It just is.